but I'm not sure support it. I want him to do, homegrown criminals next. Yeah. I said, homegrowns are next. The homegrowns built. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's fair. All right.
Take note of the people laughing. After sending hundreds of Venezuelan nationals to a maximum security prison in El Salvador with virtually no due process, today, while meeting with El Salvador's President Bukele in the Oval Office, Donald Trump floated the idea of deporting homegrown criminals. Yes, meaning American citizens to those facilities, an idea that he later doubled down on in comments he made to the press.
They're great facilities, very strong facilities, and they don't play games. I'd like to go a step further. I mean, I said it to Pam. I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country.
Joining me now is Sabrina Singh, former Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary, MSNBC contributor April Ryan, senior White House correspondent and Washington Bureau Chief for Black Press USA, and George Conway, conservative attorney and president of the Society for the Rule of Law.
No, it's hard.
I think what most disturbed me about what was happening in the Oval Office today were a couple things. Were the laughs from the people in the room, the White House staffers, okay? Maybe some of the staff from the El Salvadorian president, as well as the fact that it took a while for the reporters in the room, April, to get to the point of asking the very direct question.
You know, the press is complicit to a certain extent. Many in that room are who the White House chooses, right? And
it's important to know you were not in the Oval Office
No,
today.
I was not in the Oval Office, and that's a whole nother conversation. But here's the thing. Caitlin Collins, who's been on the beat for a very long time, covered several presidents, was the one to ask. It was how many minutes in did we get there? That was the point. That was the raison d'etre for that whole meeting about the deportation of the of Mr.
Kilmar Abrego
Garcia, and then trying to bring him back. And then she was able to ask the president, and the president knocked her out, talked down to her, and then but she was able to ask pivotal questions of the president of El Salvador, who said, hey, why should I try to send him back when you don't want him? I mean, basically, a president from another country has thumbed his nose at what the U.S. Supreme Court says, and it took that long. There were so many moments where I said, what the hey? We have never seen anything like this in our lives. And it signaled to me, the press doesn't matter. The issues don't matter anymore. The real issues don't matter. And then the Supreme Court doesn't matter as well. This is not skirting. This is going beyond a Supreme Court ruling to bring this man back. And another leader from another country says, hey, I don't have to because you don't want him.
George, jump in on this, please. And frankly, this is Kilmar Abrego Garcia is who we are talking about right now.
Correct.
But he is, I believe, a case study for what I can only take the United States president at his word. He has been wildly and egregiously transparent with what he has said he wanted to do. He said he wanted to be a dictator on day one. He said in the Oval Office when the cameras of the press weren't there, but the El Salvador president's live streaming was there, he said the homegrowns are next. He didn't say maybe, he didn't say possibly. He said they are next. This is bigger than Abrego Garcia.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. I mean, when Donald Trump says something depraved, we should believe it.
Yep.
And we haven't reached bottom yet with him because there is no limit to his moral depravity. And the fact that we can't call that out as well as we should and say that to people to say, listen, you have to take this seriously. This is not a war on terrorists. There's no evidence this man is a terrorist. This isn't a war or a battle like on the college campuses against anti-Semitism. That's not what this is about. This is a war on due process. He wants to be able to dictate the fates of individuals, including American citizens, without having to go to a court. He's, completely, he's sworn to uphold, faithfully execute the constitutional laws in the United States. He does not give one you-know-what about that.
He doesn't. And you know what? Go ahead. Sabrina, I want to note that the AP had this story about Bukele I feel like this one was from a couple weeks ago. And in the story, they write, El Salvador's constitution prohibits re-election. But after his party was victorious in 2021 legislative elections, the newly elected Congress purged the country's constitutional court, replacing judges with loyalists. They later ruled that Bukele could run for a second term. Critics say he has chipped away at the country's system of checks and balances. Bukele's administration has arrested more than 76,000 people since a gang crackdown began in March 2022. The massive arrests have been criticized for a lack of due process. This is who Donald Trump would like to be.
Yeah, you know, I think looking at this meeting in the Oval Office, this is, to what April said, you know, these are things that we've never seen before. And to welcome someone like the El Salvadorian president into the Oval Office, someone that has clearly committed human rights abuses and has a long history of doing that and is upending his own country's, you know, constitution. What kind of message does that send to our allies around the world? What kind of message does that send to Americans here at home? I think, you know, there's a lot of circular logic that was being thrown around in the Oval Office today. A lot of people saying, well, you know, kind of pointing the finger of like, it's not my fault, it's your fault. You know, at the end of the day, the administration made the mistake of sending this man and others to a prison where they have no right to be. You know, there is a place for due process. And I think, you know, George and I were talking about this. Can due process be upheld in this country? I hope so. But, you know, it's being challenged.
Who upholds